Hello and good evening. My name is Catherine from SEB Housing, and this is the information session for the 3 affordable rental units at Mill River in Wakefield. And the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the affordable units. I'm also going to discuss the application, eligibility, and lottery processes, and what to expect after the lottery drawing. So there's some slides I'll be flipping through during the session tonight. If you have any questions during the session, you're encouraged to either type them into the chat, or I'll be stopping periodically throughout the presentation to ask if anyone has any questions. When you came into the meeting, you were muted. So if you do have a question, you can unmute yourself, and then just after the question, just make sure that you mute yourself again so we minimize the background noise. The meeting is being recorded, as you heard when you entered the room. It's going to be available to view on SEB Housing's YouTube channel after tonight. So that's the reason for the recording. If you have any questions after tonight, the best way that you didn't think of and you forgot to mention while we're here together, you can connect with us by email at info@sebhousing.com. That's the quickest way to get in touch with us. If you prefer to call, that's fine as well. The number to call is on the next page here. So 617-782-6900 extension 1 if you wanted to call us after the fact. Hold on one moment here. Back to the front here. Okay. So if anyone has any issues viewing the screen or hearing me at any point, just let me know. But just for some background information on who we are, so SEB Housing, we are an off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we're not the on-site management team for the building. We've been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, collect and review applications from eligible or from applicants and determine their eligibility. And then also, eventually, we're going to be the ones running the lottery. So in the initial phases, we are your main point of contact rather than the management office. But then further along in the process, the on-site management team at Mill River would take over as your main point of contact. So there's a few steps in the process. The first being to apply for the lottery and be found eligible for the program based on that application. You'll be in touch with SEB Housing during that time, and we can answer any questions you have on the affordable housing program. We'll process your application, and we'll run the lottery. The second step in the process, you'll be in touch with the leasing office over at Mill River, and they will be screening you for lease eligibility. That's separate from screenings that SEB Housing is doing. Their lease screening might include a credit check, background check, rental check, that sort of thing that you might expect from a property owner. The third step in the process is once you've been approved by the management or the leasing office as being lease eligible and qualified to rent at their property, you'll then be directed back to SEB Housing. And then that is the point where we're going to ask that you provide verification of your income assets and other tax documentation, that sort of thing that we need for your lottery application. You'll have about a week to 10 days to do that at that point. If you haven't already, you want to check out our website, sebhousing.com. If you click on affordable housing opportunities and select I want to rent, there is a page specific to Mill River Wakefield that you'll see. And that is where you can find a downloadable version of the application and also an information packet. That information packet contains most of the material I'll be covering during the session tonight. We won't have time to cover every single item that's in there, so but I will be reviewing the main points. So it is recommended that you take a look at that information packet, even if you attended this session, because there might be some other information in there that's useful to you. So if you do choose to apply for one of the affordable units at Mill River, your first step is to complete that lottery application that you see on our website. You can submit it to us once you've completed it in one of several ways. You can email it to us or scan it to us. You can send it by fax, by regular mail, or if you're in the Needham area, that's where our office is located. We have a 24-hour drop box that's on the left side of our building. It is checked daily and it's secure. Our office address is 257 Hillside Ave, again in Needham. So whatever one of those options works best for you, go ahead and submit your lottery application in that way. We encourage you to get the lottery application in early. It is fairly brief. It should only take you about 10 minutes to complete, and that's because there's no supporting income, asset, or tax documentation that you need to provide at this early stage in the process. All of that will be required after the lottery if you are one of the top households on the waiting list. So lottery applications are due by August 22nd. So a little bit under a month left to get your application in. The applications need to be delivered or postmarked by that day in order to be considered for the lottery. You do not need to be a resident of Wakefield to apply for the lottery. There are 3 affordable apartments available. 2 of those apartments will be local residents of Wakefield will have preference for those 2 units, 2 out of 3. But that should not deter you at all from applying for this opportunity, and we'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about local preference and kind of what that means on the waiting list. All right, so the management office has let me know that the units are available now. So there won't be a delay after the lottery. If you are one of those top households and you're interested in these units, you qualify, you won't have to wait too long to sign that lease or to get a move-in date. So Mill River Wakefield, it's a brand new development in Wakefield. There's going to be a total of 16 rental units within the building. 3 of those are going to be affordable. That's why we are running that lottery. And those 3 affordable apartments are going to be rented to households with incomes at or below 80% of the area median income for the Wakefield, Boston area. The affordable units each have 2 bedroom, 2 bath. They're 950 square feet. They also have stainless steel appliances, quartz countertops in the in the kitchen. And there's hardwood floors throughout. There is a in-unit washer and dryer. It's a stackable unit. Mill River itself, the building, is located about a half mile from the downtown of Wakefield with various shops and restaurants, about 1 mile from the Wakefield commuter rail station. And the building does have an elevator. Tenants will be responsible for electricity costs. That includes electric heating, hot water, cooking, and then households will also be responsible for their own water and sewer charges. So the rent for the units, the affordable units, is $2,235. That affordable rent is not set in accordance with an applicant's income or financial circumstances. So what I mean by that is the rent doesn't change if you lose your job or you get a new job or anything like that. If there's any kind of income change in your household, your rent does not fluctuate because this isn't subsidized housing. It's a different program. It's a different affordable housing program. So the rents are set. For this housing program, the rents are set using a formula that's based on HUD's area median income. So HUD being Housing and Urban Development, the federal agency, publishes a area median income for all of the areas in the United States. So this is the Boston area that we're looking at. That's where Wakefield falls. The rent might increase one time per year, and that typically occurs when HUD revises their area median income each spring. There's always advance notice given to tenants whenever there's a rent increase. Usually they're pretty modest, between $25 to $75 of an increase, and rents will never change in the middle of your lease term. So if you signed a lease, starting in September of this year, your rent is not going to change until at least September of next year. So there already is, I believe, more interested applicants in the lottery than there are available units, because there's only 3 units at this property, 3 affordable units. So that's why we're having this lottery process. These apartments are only going to be made available to households that qualify for the affordable housing program. So households with annual income up to 80% of the area median income. And I'll talk about the income limits in just a few moments. All right, so we've covered kind of a lot of the logistical information and a little bit of a basic overview about the units at Mill River. So just a reminder again, if you have any questions, go ahead, type them into the chat or unmute yourself and I can respond. So in terms of being eligible for the affordable housing program, if you've looked at the information packet or if you plan to, there are 4 eligibility requirements listed on page 4 of that information packet. The first eligibility requirement is that households need to have qualifying income and assets. Again, I'll talk more about that a little bit later on, but for this lottery, that's the 80% area median income that is on your screen right now. So you'll see for a 1-person household, that is $82,950. That's the maximum income limit if you're a 1-person household that will qualify you for this opportunity. The second eligibility requirement is household priority will be given based on household composition. So for example, if you're a 1-person household or a couple that shares a bedroom, you're generally going to be considered a type 1 household. You're going to see that language on the information packet and on your application, type 1, type 2. Usually that basically coincides with the size of your household and your eligibility. Those smaller households, those 1-person households or 1-bedroom qualifying households can apply for a 2-bedroom unit, but the larger type 2 households are going to be placed ahead of you on the 2-bedroom waiting list. So some examples of a type 2 household is any household that has 3 or 4 people at least, and as well as some 2-person households. So if you go to page 7 of the information packet, it lists a lot more details about household type and how that plays into the waiting list placement. The third eligibility criteria to keep in mind is that households can't own a home upon move-in. If you own a home now, you would need to sell it and be off of the deed before you're eligible to lease an apartment at Mill River. And then the fourth eligibility criteria doesn't come up very often at all, but households cannot have financial interest in the development or the property or be considered a related party. These units are being offered by 259 Water Street, which is the address as well, LLC. So if you work for or you're related to the developer or the management company, you might not be eligible for this opportunity. So to circle back on the first eligibility criteria to explain a little bit more. So the income limit. Since these are affordable apartments, they're only going to be made available to households that qualify within these income parameters. They're being made available at lower prices, lower monthly rent amounts than very similar units within the building. And the maximum income limits are set by household size. So everyone who is going to be living in the apartment, you should consider them part of the household. So if you have your screen up now, I know that if you have called in, you may not see it, but I have the household minimum and maximum income limits on the screen. So again, for a 2-person household, or really for any household, the minimum income limit or approximate minimum income threshold for this opportunity is $67,000, and the maximum income limit varies based on your household size. If you're a voucher holder, if you have a Section 8 voucher, MRBP voucher, the minimum qualifying income amounts do not apply to you because the voucher that you have will be paying for a portion of your rent. So you don't need to have that minimum income. So again, a reminder that you do not need to submit verification of income with your lottery application, but I do still want to give you a little bit of a rundown of how we're going to calculate your income. So income for the program is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members. So that's income for everyone in your household. This includes bonuses, overtime, if you're receiving Social Security for a minor, for example. The only exception to this rule is that minors, so anyone under the age of 18, if they're working and earning a wage, we're not going to count that wage income. And then also dependent full-time students who are working, only the first $480 of their income is going to be counted for the full year. We are required by the program to count gross income, not net income. So the amount that you make before taxes is what we need to count when we're determining your eligibility. We understand, obviously, you don't take home that gross amount that you see on your pay stub, or your salary, but it is a requirement of the program. How we calculate your income, though, is not one size fits all. So everyone's circumstances are unique. Some applicants have a weekly salary. It's consistent throughout the year. There are also applicants who are self-employed or they work seasonally, so the income might be a little more sporadic or spread out through the year. In those circumstances, we might need to look further back into the past in order to project your anticipated income for the next 12 months. Specifically for applicants who are self-employed, you're going to need to complete a profit and loss statement to just confirm your business expenses. And you have to provide supporting documentation to support the claims. Your business expenses are taken into account if you're self-employed, but anyone who's not self-employed, it will always be that gross income that we count. We can't take into account like medical expenses or car payments, that sort of thing, unfortunately, if you're not self-employed. So in general, any income that you have been making, we're going to need to assume that you will continue to make it going forward unless we have definitive documentation, for example, from your employer, stating that your income source is not going to be coming in the coming year. So it could be something from your employer saying that bonuses won't be paid out this year or something like that. The types of income, you want to list everything on your lottery application. You want to disclose everything to us. On the application, it's going to give you some prompts. It's not just wage income that we're looking for you to write down, though. You would also need to write down any Social Security payments, child support that you receive, maybe a pension or unemployment compensation, that sort of thing. There is no minimum income for the affordable housing program. However, most management teams, including the team at Mill River, want to be sure that all tenants, whether they're paying market rate or an affordable rent, can afford that rent. The management company at Mill River has set a minimum household income equivalent to 2.5 times the monthly rent. Those amounts are listed in that amount, there's just one because it's a 2-bedroom. All 3 of these units are 2 bedrooms. So they all have the same approximate minimum household income, which is $67,000. Again, households with mobile housing vouchers can disregard those minimum incomes because they don't apply. But everyone else would need to have a household income between that minimum income floor, that $67,000, and the program maximum income limit. The only exception to that would be households with incomes just below the minimum income amount that I've listed. It is an approximate number, the $67,000. If a household is close to the minimum income but has liquid assets that you might be able to access to pay the rent, your application might be considered by the leasing office. So the minimum income amounts are not set in stone per se, but those program income limits are set in stone. Ultimately, it's going to be the leasing office's decision during their lease screening if your household and your application meets the minimum income requirement. There's not an asset limit for affordable rental opportunities. So you could have a significant amount of assets in your bank account. You might be retired, for example. We still, unfortunately, are going to need to collect information related to your assets, even though there isn't a limit. And that is because if income is generated by those assets, the generated income from assets needs to be counted towards your total household income. When we're talking about assets too, we're not talking about just checking and savings accounts, but also, money you might have in CDs or retirement accounts. It would be the net cash value of your retirement account that we need to look at. Even your Venmo, PayPal accounts, if you have them, any money that's sitting in those, stocks, bonds, that sort of thing. We do not need verification of personal assets like jewelry or cars. All right, so I've covered the eligibility criteria for the housing program and for the lottery application. So just a reminder again, if you have any questions, either type them into the chat or unmute yourself. And I see something came into the chat here, the direct message. Sure, so all utilities are paid by the tenant. So there is no utilities that are included at this property for the affordable unit. So it is electric, heating, cooking, and hot water. And then the tenants also need to pay the water and sewer that is used. So no included utilities at this property. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in this, you should apply as early as possible just to get the process started. Once you've received your lottery application, we're going to review it and contact you if any information appears missing or if we need you to fill out anything else. If you're found eligible for the lottery, you will be emailed a lottery application number, and that number will be in the form of a series of numbers. So for example, if you're the very first person to submit an application and be approved for this lottery, your number is going to be A.001. And this is the number that's going to be drawn in the lottery. It's meant to be an anonymous identifier, so your name isn't called out during the lottery. It's not a ranking of any sort, it just corresponds with the order in which you received and approved your application. So that email that you receive is also going to confirm whether or not your household qualifies for local preference. You will have indicated on your application whether or not you believe your household qualifies for that preference, and the necessary verification would have been submitted along with your application. Local preference might apply to your household if you live in Wakefield, if you work in the town, in a business within Wakefield, for the town as well, or if you're a legal guardian of a child attending Wakefield Public Schools. As I mentioned kind of at the top of the session, there are 2 of the 3 affordable units at Mill River that have local preference, which means that local preference households will have priority for those 2 units when compared to households who don't have local preference. More information is in the information packet about local preference, specifically how it works. That can be found, I think, on the last page of the information packet. But again, that is not to discourage anyone from applying who does not have local preference, because, you know, sometimes we have these lotteries and there aren't very many local preference households at all. Maybe there's 2 people ahead of you on the waiting list that are local preference and they don't qualify in the end anyway. So definitely still get your application in if you're interested. And then finally, that email that you receive after you're approved for the lottery, it's going to have an attachment that is the documentation requirements guide. And the guide provides all the items, kind of a synopsis of all the items that you're going to need to provide when SCB Housing is doing final approval after the lottery itself. So when you are invited forward, or if you're invited forward to submit your income, asset, and tax documentation, that documentation requirements guide is going to help you prep for that. So how many pay stubs you might need to submit, that sort of thing. If at any point during this process you're found to be ineligible for the lottery, so for example, you might be found to be over income, you're going to be informed and you're going to be encouraged to contact us with any questions. On your application, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, you're going to have indicated whether or not you were a household type 1 or 2. The email that you receive is going to confirm that as well. So if you want to review that email thoroughly and confirm that everything in it appears to be accurate. The lottery itself is going to be held on August 31st at 6 p.m. It's the same format as this information session via Zoom. Depending on the number of eligible applicants we have, the lottery numbers are either going to be drawn from a box that I'll have next to me here. We shuffle the numbers all up. We'll hold them up to the screen so everyone can see them, and we'll record it. Or if we have a lot of applications, sometimes we do digital lotteries where we randomize the results online. It's done via screen share, so you're able to see it in real time. Every lottery number is going to be drawn. So sometimes you think of a lottery, you might think there's just one winner per unit. But the purpose of this lottery is really to just establish an order of priority on the waiting list. So in general, it is more beneficial if your number is called early on in the lottery, but it might not necessarily be the deciding factor on whether or not your family is able to move forward in the process to lease one of these units. And that's because we still need to sort the results after the lottery by priorities. So that would mean, if you're a type 1 household and you're drawn first in the lottery, you're still going to be behind any type 2 households on that waiting list because they have priority for these 2-bedroom units. And then local preference as well would be taken into consideration. And then obviously, like I said, some people might be on the waiting list ahead of you and they're found ultimately to be ineligible in the end, or they decide to drop out because they're no longer interested in the unit. So if your number is drawn later in the lottery, you shouldn't lose hope that you'll be able to rent one of these units, because you may still have the opportunity to do so just later on in the process. Once I've done all the sorting after the lottery, we try to get the results out to applicants as soon as possible. It's usually the same night of the lottery, then the next morning at the latest. We will send an email to you with the waiting list attached and a little more information about next steps in the process. When you're reviewing that email and the waiting list that were attached, you're going to find your lottery application number, and you can see where you fall on the waiting list. At that point, you'll have a better idea of whether or not you might be invited forward to the next step in the process, because actually during the lottery night, it won't be clear because the order in which your number was drawn isn't necessarily the order that you're going to be on the waiting list because of the sorting that we need to do afterwards. So the next step in the process after the waiting lists are established, maybe you're one of the top households on one of the waiting lists, the next step in the process is to apply for a lease. So following the lottery, we're going to put you in touch with the management team. Your contact information will be shared with the leasing office at Mill River as well. And so you can, so that will facilitate the lease screening. You'll have about 5 days to connect with the management team to initiate that lease screening process. So remember that SCB Housing is screening for lottery and affordable housing program eligibility. We don't screen your household for lease eligibility. The management company is going to be doing that at Mill River. And like I said, the lease screening usually includes, credit, background, rental history check to determine if you're eligible to rent at the property. Be aware too that leasing offices may invite more households to complete a lease screening than there are available units. So for example, at Mill River, there's just the 3 2-bedroom affordable units, but 6 or more households might be invited from the waiting list to complete lease screening. And this is a standard practice by management companies because they want to make sure that the units are leased as quickly as possible. And sometimes the process is slowed down by households who don't qualify or maybe who submitted an application but didn't follow through. So if you're one of those first households on the waiting list, you still want to refrain from informing your current landlord if you're renting right now. You don't want to give notice right away once you see that you're the first person on one of these waiting lists, because there's still a few steps in the process. The first being approved by the management company, and then you also need to be approved again by SCB Housing once we've collected and reviewed all of your income, asset, and tax documentation. Once you are lease approved, though, this is the point in the process that having a position near the top of the waiting list is particularly beneficial to you. If you're one of those top households on the waiting list, you have the first chance to reserve an affordable unit. So if you have the top position on the, one of the 2-bedroom waiting lists, you're going to be able to select whichever unit you prefer. This is true even if someone else ahead of you happens to complete their lease eligibility first. If you're that top household, you're always going to have top priority if you're first in the waiting list. You'll be able to tour the unit, make your decision based on whatever factors are important to you. Maybe you want a certain location in the property, or you want a certain lease date, that sort of thing. You would be figuring all that out with the leasing office. And then the second person on the waiting list has the second choice with the remaining units, and so on. So once you've reserved an affordable unit, the leasing office is going to notify SCB Housing, and then we will contact you at that point to coordinate your submission of all of the income, asset, and tax documentation that's now required in order for us to complete your final program eligibility review. So hopefully at that point in the process, you've been able to review that documentation requirements guide that was sent to you as an attachment back when you were first found eligible for the lottery. If you have, then you have all of your information together, pay stubs, tax returns, that sort of thing, and you're able to submit that to us. You'll have about 10 days to do that, to get that information into us. We'll work with you. Most people don't get all of their information in on the first attempt. You'll be sent an incomplete notice if that's the case. Don't sweat it. It happens all the time. There's a lot of information that's required. Sometimes when you submit information, it prompts more questions from us, that sort of thing. We'll work with you to get all the information we need. Once SCB Housing approves your file, we're going to notify you and the leasing office, so they are aware that you can now establish a move-in date with the leasing office and sign that lease. Our program certifications at SCB Housing are good for 6 months. So these units are available now. If for any reason, I don't think this would happen, but I just want to mention it just in case, if for any reason your move-in date is more than 6 months from when we certify you, you might need to submit updated income documentation closer to your lease update. But again, I don't think that's going to be an issue here because the units are available now, and we haven't even certified you yet. So that would mean, 6 months from now, this would be if you were moving in early 2024. Once you've signed a lease, you're done with screening until your lease renewal date. We hope you love the apartment, you want to stay there, want to continue living there beyond the first year. If you do, you'll need to recertify your income with the leasing office prior to your lease renewal. So we always encourage anyone who's renting an affordable unit to keep sort of their income, assets, all that sort of thing, keep a file in your home so you have that when the time comes to recertify. If at recertification your income is increased, or you're now above that 80% of the AMI amount, that's fine. Households remain eligible for the affordable housing apartment as long as your total household income doesn't exceed 140% of the current year's AMI. So page 14 of the information packet lists the 140% figure for the household sizes. But for example, a household of 2 would have qualified for an 80% AMI unit through the lottery with an income at or below $94,800. That same family at recertification right now, in terms of what the area median incomes are for Boston, could make up to $132,720 at the time of recertification in order to remain eligible to rent the affordable apartment. So you've got a little bit of wiggle room there. If someone gets a raise, if you get a new job, that doesn't mean that you would need to start paying market rent at this property or move out, which is good. So that covers everything from the information packet that I wanted to get to. Again, you can find the lottery application for the affordable units at Mill River on our website. But I'll stick around for a few minutes if you have any questions that I didn't cover, anything that didn't come up, or any questions on material that I did cover, let me know. Happy to answer them. And then again, the lottery applications are due on August 22nd, so a little bit less than a month to get those in. No income verification at this point, just the lottery application is needed. All right, if you don't have any other questions, just a reminder again, if you think of something after tonight that you weren't able to ask, you can send us an email at info@sdbhousing.com. That's the easiest way to get in touch with us. We'll get back to you usually within the day. And yeah, we wish you good luck in the lottery if you've already applied. And if you haven't, you want to get that application in by the deadline. Thanks so much for attending and have a good night. Bye now.